Hi, I'm Amy Shannon, and this is another episode of Exposed with Impaired Denied. And I haven't gone out much because of the colder weather, um, and just kind of hunkering down inside. Um, I don't know what it is. I've been so focused, and it's so important. And sometimes I just feel deflated or defeated, but I'm not going to give up. I'm still doing my writing my letters and mailing them out. I have a whole bunch more that I research I have to do in order to contact other businesses other than government officials, because it seems that the government officials, um, they're just like, it's like, oh, it's just one person complaining, big deal. Who cares? My intention, my mission is to make all public access buildings accessible for those who are mobility impaired. Um, and that means updating the American Disabilities Act of 2010 and also removing the Architectural Barriers Act of 1968 and taking some of those regulations, adding them to the American Disabilities Act, but also requiring that all public access buildings have some type of way that a person who is mobility impaired can access it, either through a button or an automatic door. I'm sure other people have thought about that, but and I've done some research. I've been looking, I've seen YouTube videos on people showing how to get inside using your wheelchair, how to get your walker in your car, get your wheelchair in your car, things like that. And that's something too. Um, that's really important. But there are times when you need to say, hey, what about me? Let me, I can't walk inside a building without having to hold on to somebody, or I have to use a mobility access, mobility aid. And in my case, it's a wheelchair. I use electric wheelchair, and I am not too fond of the one that I have. And eventually, I hope to get a better one, because I swear this thing is possessed. I don't even have to touch it, and it'll just flip or turn without me touching the nozzle. And I can't keep it has manual brakes, but I can't every time I'm sitting someplace on a flat ground and not touching my joystick, I should not move. I should just stay still. Sometimes I turn it off if I'm going to be sitting in the spot for longer than a couple of minutes. It's hard for me to use because of my hands to use the manual brakes on my wheelchair. And my wheelchair does not it's not evenly distributed with weight. So if I go up a small incline, I have to kind of lean forward to distribute the weight myself. But moving forward with thinking about all the stuff um, that brought me to this point of being mobility impaired. Um, there are so many different ways a person can become disabled. And sometimes it is a slow progression, and that's what mine was, a slow progression over 19 years. So, November 2nd is I call it my trigger date because it's the anniversary of the date, my incident. And I say the word incident when I mean that my body was pummeled almost to death. Um, and then I had to fight to get justice. So, on this video, now I'm going to warn you about the quality, because when I recorded these in 2006, I recorded them from a DVR to a VCR and then put them on my computer. So the quality is, considering it came from a VCR tape, VHS, not too bad, considering I was like flipping channels and record. I also did some DVRs and I had to copy those, and I don't even remember this is 2006, the end of 2005, 2006 technology. But I had put together a compilation of all the news reports on everything that had happened to me. And mind you, this, is almost 19 years ago. Well, it was 19 years ago that I was injured severely. I spent 8 days in the hospital. My sons were in a foster care. And one of the things that throughout the whole entire process was that I was not getting my kids, my boys, they did not interact with law enforcement except for when they were removed from the house and put in foster care. They were not questioned by law enforcement. They were never part of any press conference. You might hear them in the background when they're playing, but they were never put them on TV or even in the case. So I've decided that at least for this one time to show something that happened 19 years ago and what I had to do to get justice. Because I think sometimes people need to be reminded of what domestic violence can do to someone. It could be physical, it could be mental, it could be both. And my whole outlook on that changed when it happened to me. So I'm going to share the video. Just give me a moment.
Feel free, but DA David Soares is firing right back. Amy Witkowski of Loudonville says her husband beat her severely and choked her in November. Robert Witkowski was let out of jail after 25 days because the case hadn't gone before a grand jury.
My autistic son, so about 90% of it, and there's fears that in nightmares, that is control.
Witkowski says the DA's office did not contact her until the day before her husband got out. But Soares says that's not true. After hearing about the case, Albany County lawmaker Ann Camilla called for the legislature's law committee to investigate.
It is incredibly irresponsible for a legislature to conduct a press conference presenting a victim that is still involved in an open case, placing this office in a position where we have to account for our actions by divulging information about a victim that is still a necessary witness in our case.
Soares says the case against Robert Witkowski wasn't ready to go
Amy
before a
Shannon,
grand jury,
and this is
and yet
another
the
episode
case
of
is still
Exposed
open.
Mobility-Impaired Denied.
The attorney for
the Albany County District Attorney's Office tonight we're going to hear from both sides of this controversial situation.
go free without prosecution. But DA David Soares says it's still an open case, and he says Robert Witkowski was set free because there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute within 45 days allowed by law. It's a complicated case. Research Stone sorts it out for us live in Albany. Jeff?
Amy Witkowski came forward criticizing David Soares' actions, but Soares fired back, defending his office.
Recording in progress.
Hi, I'm Amy Shannon, and this is another episode of Mobility-Impaired going trial or plead guilty.
Amy Witkowski is talking about her estranged husband, upset that he was released from jail without an indictment. District Attorney David Soar says it's still an ongoing case.
It's an open investigation. It's a case that is still moving forward.
I haven't gotten out
Witkowski
much
says her husband beat her, causing serious injuries to her head, neck, and face in their Loudonville home
just kind
back on
of
November 2nd.
hunkering down inside.
I was going to die.
I don't know what it is.
Police
I've
reports
been
were
so
filed that
focused,
Robert
and
Witkowski was
it's
arrested
so
on felony
important.
assault
And
charges,
sometimes I
but
just
was
feel
released from jail on
deflated
December
or
30th because the
defeated,
DA's office
but
says
I'm not
there
going to give
wasn't
up. I'm
enough
still
evidence to
doing my,
indict him.
writing my letters and
45
mailing
days
them out.
required by law.
I have a whole bunch more that research I have to do in order to contact other businesses other than government officials, because it seems
Soar
that
stresses
government
it's not
officials,
unusual for this to happen.
they're just like, it's like, oh, it's just one person complaining, big deal, who cares? My intention, my mission is to make all public access buildings accessible for those who are mobility impaired.
Amy Witkowski, who
and
went
that
public
means
today with
updating
Republican Albany
the
County
American Disabilities
legislator Ann
Act of
Camella by her
2010,
side, denies
and
all
also,
allegations that this is a political
removing
attack
the
on the DA.
And I voted for
the
David Soar
Architectural Barriers
specifically
Act
because he
of
was
1968
the victims.
and taking some of those regulations, adding them to the American Disabilities Act, but also
Now, Soars, of
requiring
course, is a
that all
Democrat.
public
Camella
access
has called for
buildings
an investigation by the Albany County
some type
Legislators Law
of
Committee.
way that
DA
a
David Soar
person
says his
who is
office is
mobility impaired
committed
can access
to,
it either through a
to
button
help
or an
victims
automatic
of
door.
crime. He says it's more than any other office in the area.
I'm sure
Yeah.
All right, thank you, Jeff.
other
That's our
people have thought
investigation.
about
After
that,
allegations, the DA's office
and
let an
I've done
accused
some research.
wife
I've
beater
been looking,
back on the streets.
I've seen YouTube
Good evening and
videos
thanks for
on
joining
people
us. I'm
showing
Lydia
how to
Polina.
get inside
The Albany County
using your
DA is
wheelchair,
being accused of failing to
how
indict a
to
domestic violence suspect in a timely manner.
get your
The
walker
suspect
in your
was
car,
released from
get your
jail
wheelchair
almost 2
in
months
your
after his
car,
arrest on a
things
felony
like
charge.
that.
Cody Tucker
And,
joins us now from the Albany County Courthouse with
and that
more.
is, that's
The
something
suspect's
to,
wife says she's been living in fear for
you know,
her
that's
life ever
really
since her
important.
husband was
But
released.
there are
Amy
times
Witkowski
when
says these
you
photos
need
were
to
taken after her husband repeatedly punched, kicked, and choked her on November
say,
2nd.
hey, what about me? Let me, I can't walk inside a building without having to hold on to somebody, or I have to use a mobility
She describes hiding in the bushes
access,
until dark, then running
mobility
miles
aid,
through backyards to state
and
police
in my case,
Police
it's a
arrested Robert
wheelchair.
Witkowski. He was
I
released
use
in
electric
December
wheelchair,
because his case
and
was
I am
not
not
brought
too fond
before
of the
a
one
grand
that I
jury within the
have,
required
and
45-day
eventually
period.
I hope to
Amy says
get a better
prosecutors
one,
told her that there was no action on the case because they
I
didn't
swear
have all
this
the
thing
evidence
is
and that they
possessed.
just got
I don't
the
even have to
file.
touch it, and it'll just flip or turn without me touching the nozzle, and I
The
can't
Republican
keep,
County
it
legislator
has
is now
manual
calling for an
brakes,
investigation
but
by the
I can't,
legislature's law
every
committee.
time
Other
I'm
prominent
sitting
Republicans facilitated
someplace
this
on
interview.
flat
The DA is a
ground
Democrat, but Camilla
and not
says this is
touching
not about
my
politics.
Why are
joystick,
victims
I should not have to,
victimized by the system?
I
That's
should
the main
not
question.
move, I should just stay still.
It seems to me that it's obvious that there was some type of
Sometimes I
breakdown
turn
in
it
the
off
system.
if I'm
So
going
I'd
to be
like a
sitting in
simple
one
answer.
spot
What
for
happened? Why was there a
longer than a couple
breakdown?
We
minutes.
have reviewed the case here and tried.
It's hard
We
for
are
me to
investigating this
use,
case.
because of my
There are
hands, to
documents,
use
medical
the
records that we
manual
have secured, and we're
brakes
still
on my
reviewing.
wheelchair.
Albany
And my
County DA
wheelchair
David Soar
does
says
not,
his office did not
it's
drop
not
the
evenly
ball and that
distributed
there were no
with weight,
problems
so
with
if I go up a
paperwork.
small
That they
incline,
have been
I have
carefully
to kind of
considering
lean
the
forward
case,
to
but that it was
distribute the
simply
weight
not
myself.
ready for the grand jury.
It is incredible,
But moving forward with
irresponsible
thinking about all the stuff that
a legislature
um,
to conduct a press conference
that brought me
presenting
to
a
this
victim
point
that is still
of
involved in an
being
open
mobility
case.
impaired.
Soar spoke of his office's help in securing orders
there
of protection
are
and changing locks.
so
Amy
many
Witkowski said she'd feel
different
safest if her
ways a
husband were
person
behind
can
bars.
become
Lydia,
disabled.
Amy Tucker live in Albany. Victim of domestic
And
violence
sometimes
claims her case was forgotten and her
it is
attacker
a slow
walked out of
progression,
jail.
and
Now
that's
a
what
county
mine
legislator
was.
is also speaking out against
slow
DA David
progression
Soar, saying his
over
office
19
is slacking
years.
off when it comes to protecting
So,
victims. Patricia Thomas has that story.
November 2nd is my,
Or as many locks as we
I call it my trigger date, because it's the anniversary of the date of my incident, and I say the word
Amy
incident
Witkowski
when I
says
mean
she
that
lived in
my
absolute
body
fear.
was pummeled almost to death.
or to my eye socket.
And then
Multiple concussions,
I had to
bruising.
fight to
After
get
spending
justice.
35 days behind
So,
bars for felony assault,
on this
her husband
video,
Robert was not indicted
now
by a
I'm going to
grand
warn you
jury,
about the quality
so he walked out of
because
jail. Amy
when I
says the DA's
recorded
office
these
admitted
in
to her they had made a
2006,
mistake and let
I
her
recorded
case
them
slip through the cracks.
from a DVR to a VCR,
But District Attorney
and
David Soares
then
tells a much different story.
put them on my computer. So the quality is, considering it came from a VCR tape, VHS,
Soares says the county
not too
was
bad,
not forgotten. In fact, their
considering it
office
was,
tried to help
I was like
protect her.
flipping channels and record. I also did some DVRs, and I had to copy those, and I don't even
The DA's
remember.
office sent somebody to
This is
change the locks on her
2006,
home.
the end of
I'm missing something here.
2006
You're supposed to lock
technology.
up the person who
so,
did these crimes, not lock her in her home.
But
Now,
I
Amy
had
said
put
to
together
have
a
all the-
compilation of all the news reports on everything that had happened to me. And mind you, this, is almost 19 years ago. But it was 19 years ago
So
that I
I
was
guess
injured
that is
severely.
how this
I
video
spent 8 days in the hospital.
So
My sons were
And
Here we
Brendan
in
Quinn,
foster care.
a political consultant,
And one
known
of the
for his
things
efforts to get
that
Republicans
throughout
elected.
the whole entire
Rutkowski
process
says at
was
one
that I
point
was
someone
not
from the
wanting my
DA
kids,
staff came to her
my
saying the
boys,
case
to
had
be-
fallen through the cracks and that the
they did
person
not
responsible
interact
had been
with law
dealt with.
enforcement, except
There is
for
no
when they were
truth
removed
to
from the
those
house and
statements.
put in
That
foster
case
care. They were not
reviewed by our
questioned
felony review
by law enforcement. They were never part of
here in
any
the
press
office. There were
conference.
decisions that were made
You might
on
hear
that
them
case,
in
and
the
that case is still
background when
being
they're
prosecuted by
playing.
the service.
The DA
But
says
they
he'll
were
leave it to
never,
a
I
jury
never
or a
put
grand
them
jury to
on
decide whether
TV
evidence amounts to serious
or
physical injury.
in the middle
He
of
says
the
the case has a unique
So,
set of facts and could
I
be returned
decided
to
that,
town court to be handled as a misdemeanor. In Albany, Craig Smith,
at
CBS
least
6
for
News.
this one
Finally, a
time,
string of days more
to show something that happened 19 years ago
In
and
bars
what
without bail
I had
tonight,
to do
accused of beating his wife
to
and
get
threatening to
justice.
kill her. A story we've been
Because
following for you. His wife says he
I
should
think
have been in
sometimes
jail
people
long
need to be
before this, but at
reminded
least
of
now
what
she can have a good night's sleep.
domestic violence can do to
It's
somebody. It
that
could be
sigh
physical,
is
it could be
the
mental,
sigh
it
of
could be
relief.
both.
We first met Amy
And,
Witkowski 2 weeks ago when we saw her
my
wounds
whole
from an alleged
outlook
November
on
beating by her
that
husband Robert
changed
Witkowski. He was
when
arrested but never charged,
it
and
happened to
then
me.
set free, terrifying
So
his
I'm going to
family.
share the video. Just give me a moment.
The memories come back. And I feel it's not even just that I can see him coming at me, but I can remember.
White Peter killed 3, but DA David Soares is firing right back. Amy Witkowski of Lauderdale says her husband beat her severely and choked her in November. Robert Witkowski was let out of jail after 45 days because the case hadn't gone before a grand jury.
More victim advocates are needed. Hurry up the process. But Amy Witkowski now has the result she wanted for her and her 3 young sons.
Witkowski says the DA's office did not contact her until the day before her husband got out. But Soares says that's not true. After hearing about the case, Albany County lawmaker Ann Camilla called for the legislature's law committee to investigate.
It is
Amy told us
incredible.
her sons often ask her what she did to make Daddy so mad. She
Irresponsible
tells them, I didn't do
for
anything, and even if I had, he doesn't have the right to do that.
To conduct a press conference presenting a victim that is still
When
involved
we first
in
heard
an
about Amy
open
Witkowski's
case,
case a few weeks ago, she was
placing this
angry the
office in
DA
a
hadn't
position where
filed
we
charges
have
against
to
her husband after
account
he
for our
allegedly beat her.
actions
Fox 23's Regina
by
Wall has our update.
divulging information
This
about a
is Amy
victim that is
Witkowski
still
3
a
months
necessary
ago. Battered,
witness
bruised, and
in our
badly
case.
beaten.
Soares says the case against Robert Witkowski wasn't ready to go before a grand jury, and he adds that the case is still open. The attorney for
The Albany County District
This is
Attorney's
Amy
Office set him
Witkowski
free.
today.
Tonight, we're to hear from both sides of this controversial story.
her husband Robert goes free without prosecution. But DA David Soares says this is still an open case, and he says Robert Witkowski was set free because there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute within 45 days allowed by law. It's a complicated case. Fox 23's Jeff Shepperstone sorts it out for us live in Albany. Jeff?
Hi, Ann. Amy Witkowski came forward criticizing David Soares' actions, but Soares
Source fired back, defending his
learned that her
office.
husband had been
I
rearrested
want him
and
indicted and I
indicted.
want him to do this whole thing, either go to trial or plead guilty.
Amy Witkowski is talking about her estranged husband, upset that he was released from jail without an indictment. District Attorney David Soar says it's still an ongoing case.
It's an open investigation. It's a case that is still moving forward.
Witkowski says her husband beat her, causing serious injuries to her head, neck, and face in their Loudonville home back on November 2nd.
Pretty much his hands around my throat
As
and
for
he told me
Witkowski,
that
she says her goal is to now help other women get out of situations
Police reports
like
were
hers.
filed and Robert Witkowski was arrested on felony assault charges, but was released from jail on December 30th because the DA's office says there wasn't enough evidence to indict him within the 45 days required by
That was
law.
Regina
When
Wells
you have
reporting.
a
Amy
case where
Witkowski says
someone is
she is
alleging
planning on
assault
divorcing her
second,
husband.
there's an issue of
Meanwhile,
serious
Robert
physical
Witkowski is
injury,
expected back in court
and
in
you have
late
to
March.
explore that issue of serious physical injury.
Soares stresses it's not unusual for this to
On a story
happen.
we've been
It is
following for a few
incredibly
months, a Loudonville man sentenced today for beating his wife.
irresponsible
You may remember
for
her from when she loudly criticized
legislature
the Albany County DA weeks
to
ago,
conduct a press
accusing him of
conference
dropping the ball on this
presenting
case.
a victim
But as News
that
10
is
Joy
still
Marlin reports,
involved
everything's
in an
changed
open
since then.
case.
Amy Witkowski, who
33-year-old
went
Amy
public
Witkowski
today with
says
Republican
this is the
Albany
day
County
she's been
legislator
waiting
Ann
for.
Camella by her side, denies all allegations that this is a political attack
Although
on the
it took
DA.
some turmoil to get here.
Source
Flashback to
specifically
last
because he
November
was
when police
for
arrested
the
Amy's
victims.
husband, 48-year-old Robert Witkowski, for allegedly beating and threatening to kill her. Almost 2 months
Now,
after the
Soares,
arrest,
of course, is a
Amy
Democrat.
still
Camella has
hasn't
called for an
DA's office.
investigation by the Albany
Finally
County
received a
Legislators
call
Law
saying that
Committee.
her husband
DA
would be
David
released
Soares
from
says his
jail
office
the
is
next
committed
day.
to
Amy fired back at
to help
David Soares,
victims
the
of
county
crime. He says
legislator
it's more than any
by
other
his
office in
side.
the area. Ann.
All right, thank you, Jeff. That's our
Investigation after allegations the DA's office let an accused wife beater back on the streets. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Lydia Colbita.
And I'm Jim Cambrick. The Albany County DA is being accused of failing to indict a domestic violence suspect in a timely manner.
The suspect was released from jail almost 2 months after his arrest on a felony charge. Kumi Tucker joins us now from the Albany County Courthouse with more. Kumi?
The suspect's wife says she's been living in fear for her life ever since her husband was released. Amy Witkowski says these photos were taken after her husband repeatedly punched, kicked, and choked her on November 2nd.
Too late. I smashed my head against the wall. Next thing I know, I remember opening my eyes on the floor, and he was kicking me in the head, telling me to stop faking it.
She describes hiding in the bushes until dark, then running miles through backyards to State Police Loudonville. Police arrested Robert Witkowski. He was released in December because his case was not brought before a grand jury within the required 45-day period. Amy says prosecutors told her that there was no action on the case because they didn't have all the evidence and that they just got the files.
What went through your head when you found out he was going to be released? He's going to come back, kill me.
Amy spoke to us with Ann Camella by her side. The Republican county legislator is now calling for an investigation by the legislature's law committee. Other prominent Republicans facilitated this interview. The DA is a Democrat, but Camella says this is not about politics.
Why are victims feeling victimized by the system? That's the main question. It seems to me that it's obvious that there was some type of breakdown in the system. So I'd like a simple answer. What happened? Why was there a breakdown?
We have reviewed the case here internally. We are investigating this case. There are documents, medical records that we have secured, and we're still reviewing the matter.
Albany County DA David Soar says his office did not drop the ball and that there were no problems with paperwork, that they have been carefully considering the case, but that it was simply not ready for the grand jury.
It is incredibly
had the same diagnosis.
irresponsible for a legislature to conduct a press conference presenting a victim that is still involved in an open case.
Soar spoke of his office's help in securing orders of protection and changing locks. Amy Witkowski said she'd feel safest if her husband were behind bars. Lydia?
Kumi Tucker live and all. Victim of domestic violence claims her case was forgotten and her attacker walked out of jail. Now a county legislator is also speaking out against DA David Soares, saying his office is slacking off when it comes to protecting victims. Latricia Thomas has that story.
Bought as many locks as we could for the house.
My kids actually made signs with their windows that said, "Daddy, don't come home."
Amy Witkowski says she lives in absolute fear.
The primary blows to my face were to my eye sockets. Multiple concussions. Bruising.
After spending 45 days behind bars for felony assault, her husband Robert was not indicted by a grand jury, so he walked out of jail. Amy says the DA's office admitted to her they had made a mistake and let her case slip through the cracks.
We are prosecuting that defendant as we speak.
But District Attorney David Soares tells a much different story.
There's a lot of information that still needs to be sifted through before this case is presented to a grand jury.
Soares says Witkowski was not forgotten. In fact, their office tried to help protect her.
We have also gone to great lengths here to ensure her security by arranging on 3 separate occasions to have her locks changed.
The DA's office sent somebody to change the locks on her home. I'm missing something here. You're supposed to lock up the person who did these crimes, not lock her in her home.
Now, Amy sought the help of all the...
have awake seizures, and they're very painful. It's having a seizure, but you're actually awake, you're aware of your surroundings, and it can be very difficult.
So I guess that is all this video can play.
And Brendan Quinn, a political consultant known for his efforts to get Republicans elected. Witkowski says at one point someone from the DA's staff came to her saying the case had fallen through the cracks and that the person responsible had been dealt with.
There is no truth to those statements. That case was reviewed by our felony review here in the office. There were decisions that were made on that case, and that case is still being prosecuted by this office.
The DA says he'll leave it to a jury or a grand jury to decide whether evidence amounts to serious physical injury. He says the case has a unique set of facts and could be recharged to town court to be handled as a misdemeanor. In Albany, Craig Smith, CBS 6 News.
Finally, a string of days more in bars without bail tonight, accused of beating his wife and threatening to kill her. A story we've been following for you. His wife says he should have been in jail long before this, but at least now she can have a good night's sleep. That sigh is a sigh of relief. We first met Amy Witkowski 2 weeks ago when we saw her wounds from an alleged November beating by her husband, Robert Witkowski. He was arrested but never charged, and then set free, terrifying his family.
Nightmares. And memories come back. And I feel it's not even just that I can see him coming at me, but I can remember the pain I felt at that time.
But it's a pain she won't have to feel for some time, she hopes. Witkowski is in jail without bail, charged with 2 counts of assault. The reason it took so long, the DA's office says domestic violence cases are touchy, and more victim advocates are needed to hurry up the process.
In a perfect world, it would cut down dramatically on the amount of time it would take to get results.
But Amy Witkowski now has the results she wanted for her and her 3 young sons.
Trying to build a new life for just me and my kids. We're moving.
Doesn't matter.
Just taking it one day at a time. As soon as I can afford one, get a divorce. Right now, I can't afford one.
Amy told us her sons often ask her what she did to make Daddy so mad. She tells them, I didn't do anything, and even if I had, he doesn't have the right to do that.
Another behind bars tonight, and the county woman is telling us she is relieved, no longer living in fear.
We first heard about Amy Witkowski's case a few weeks ago, but she was angry the DA hadn't filed charges against her husband after he allegedly beat her. Fox 23's Regina Waldron has our update.
This is Amy Witkowski 3 months ago, battered, bruised, and badly beaten.
There are domestic violence cases that
punched me probably close to 30 or 40 times in the face with both fists.
This is Amy Witkowski today. on the mend and at peace, knowing that her estranged husband is finally back behind bars and charged with 2 felonies for allegedly beating her.
The night that I found out he was arrested was like the best night's sleep I've gotten in so long.
Witkowski's husband Robert was first arrested and jailed in November, but he was released a short time later when the DA's office said there wasn't enough evidence to indict him within the 45 days required by law. On Wednesday, Witkowski learned that her husband had been rearrested and indicted.
I was told they had everything they needed to move forward with the grand jury and let the grand jury decide. I was starting to doubt that an indictment was going to happen at all.
Witkowski criticized the DA's office when her husband was set free, and there was fear he wouldn't be prosecuted. Tonight, a spokesman for the DA told us that cases involving domestic violence are always difficult to prosecute and require extra care. They're all unique, and there was nothing unusual about the way this case was handled. As for Witkowski, she says her goal is to now help other women